Thank you all for joining and spending your Wednesday lunch hour-ish with us. And and we are winding closer. So Louisa and Eric have heard all the spiel of all the ESHIP staff. Meg, we will see you next week. Yes?
Unfortunately, you won't, but you will see a bunch of my partners. So I am actually headed to Collision in Toronto next week with 8 local tech startups. So we are dividing and conquering, but we have a team of about 6 headed down to ESHIP.
Okay. Well, good. We will host them appropriately, I hope.
I have no doubts.
And then I got to spend some time with Brandon last month, and I don't know if you've seen him since he got back from GEC.
I have very briefly, and we weren't able to connect, and I got sort of the 30-second download, and we haven't had time for coffee since, but it sounds like it was an absolutely incredible trip.
Yes, it was an absolutely incredible trip. And so what was his big takeaway? I'm putting you on the spot.
I was going to say, I don't know that I sort of got his biggest takeaway. He just seemed incredibly inspired. I don't even know that he could sort of put it all into sort of one word or in the 30 seconds I got with him walking out of another meeting. But he just seemed really enthusiastic about what he had learned and really sort of optimistic about all the incredible people doing this amazing work around the globe, not only, locally or nationally.
That's important. So for Louisa and Eric, as I was at GEC, the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, our mutual friend Brandon was there, and I think, when we talk about shared vision, one of the things that seems to be reoccurring for me is the whole idea of, I found my people, these are my tribe, that kind of thing, and to walk into a room, whether Meg is at Collision or we walk into a co-working space or something like that, there's something almost tangible about that emotion and that feeling that you get, and so I don't know how to quantify it, and hopefully what we'll be able to do with this shared vision is to figure out how to package it and show people and share. So I'm really curious about your thoughts on when you realize, like, when you're at something or do something, and when you realize that the people that you're around have that same idea, concept, feeling, something like that. So is there something that comes to mind about an experience that you've had or feel? So kind of an oddball question, but
so what are we answering, like just...
so when have you felt like that, like, and how is it conveyed?
I feel as though I felt like there was a shared vision, just at any conference that I go to, pretty much, about ecosystem building or in business incubation, like, felt like that when we did the convening in December, and how is it conveyed? How is the feeling conveyed? Or like, by me or by other people?
I think, how did you know? How do you know that that you were in sync?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think that it's kind of the same feeling that one gets with any, like, if I go to a salsa congress and I'm salsa dancing, I think that it's conveyed in the marketing materials. It's conveyed in the, like, reasons why people would want to come, yeah, I feel like it's not something that you figure out when you get there. It's something that you already know you're stepping into. That's kind of how I feel about it. Does that make sense? Yeah. I feel like it's not really a thing that you kind of happen upon. I think that conveyed through the intention setting before you even get there. Or like if you are going to a co-working space, or some sort of, there was a reason that you were drawn there. And I think that that's really it's very difficult to kind of talk about it because it's a little bit of an intangible thing, but I feel like that, even when we had the first ESHIP, they had a little website and they talked about what it was. And I felt like I knew, or how it was conveyed was before I even got there, kind of I had a good idea of what I was getting into.
Eric, what do you think?
It's difficult to describe. Yeah. So, I mean, the commonality that I'm seeing is I kind of put together like kind of this and the related groups, startup champions, but much earlier than that, startup weekend organizers, and then also Code for America, which is basically folks who are running Code for America brigades, doing a lot of civic tech work in towns and stuff. And in a way, the folks that are already self-selected into doing this kind of stuff by virtue of 1 Million Cups is another example. So the people that choose to organize a startup weekend or 1 Million Cups, they're doing that for a reason. And I think that means that 90% of those folks are probably doing it for what we might describe as the right reason. And they sort of self-selected into these kind of people. I think in a way what's different about ESHIP is it's including a few of these other sort of baskets. So it's not just it's not just 1 Million Cups folks. It's not just the folks who do India. So I think it's interesting, and I think one of the things that makes some of our jobs tougher is that the ESHIP community really involves folks who are joined or have a similar role in doing several things in their communities, but it's not all necessarily the same. I think that should lend itself towards a healthier, longer term, more resilient effort, but it's a little bit more difficult in the front end because it's not everyone walking in the door has the same experience. I don't know.
I like that. I think that's really important when you say that we don't do the same thing. I think we have a shared goal, or kind of I don't know if it's a mission, vision, whatever, because that's what this goal is about, right? Is to have something, but the individual tasks or the way we go about it is very different, which makes it really interesting, and opens up new doors and venues and methods that we may not have tried because we're just not in those circles. Plus, I think it's really important when we have people that can serve as translators, the people that are in certain rooms that we're not. So Eric is in government, and government's not usually one that we are able to tap into. You have to be in certain circles and have certain roles to really talk to government, unless they hold a town hall, and then you're only hearing parts of the equation, right? So Louisa talking about data. Right, so you're the translator. So somewhere between an analytics data person and Norris and the rest of the world is you. Like you're in that equation somewhere along the way. Meg, what do you think about all this?
I think it's really interesting, and as everyone's talked, sort of that idea of self-selecting, and whatever reason it is, the fact that people show up and that walking into it, you understand that you're walking into a space where others care and others have shown up. And so I think locally that has shown up. We started about 9 months ago doing an every other week breakfast for ecosystem builders. And so we call it the Ecosystem Builder Breakfast, or the Community Educators Breakfast. And we've started to invite anyone that is building the startup community here or providing education to startups. So whether that be an accelerator program or co-starters program, the folks that won 1 Million Cups. And it's become this really safe space for all of us to show up and just have conversations about what's challenging, what's going really great. Have you learned a really interesting new best practice, or, you know, found a really great software platform that you're using? But every time I walk into those breakfasts, to your point about how does it feel, or sort of how does it show up, it feels like I'm meeting with a bunch of friends I haven't seen in a long time. And I think about it as, you know, like, it's just sort of beautiful that you show up, and even when folks don't know each other really well, when they walk in, by the time they walk out, they're planning follow-ups, and there's just this closeness that's created, and sort of this authentic connection, because everyone chooses to show up and everyone genuinely cares and gives their time on Wednesday morning, not because it's another meeting that gets put on the calendar, but because they genuinely want to be part of this community and part of building this community. And so we've talked about it a few times with those of us that sort of manage that happening. And it really does feel like, you know, it's like meeting your best friend's best friend. You're just meeting a lot of really genuinely incredible people. And that I'm very surprised at how much has come out of just those breakfasts. And I think it's because people show up, they care, and there's really some genuine sharing that happens. So in agreement with everything, but I think that's, you know, from a feeling standpoint, how it shows up here is just that sort of authentic sort of friendship. We call it faux workers here. We have a lot of people that are working as individuals and sort of a lot of one woman or man organizations. And so this like faux worker network of really having, you know, to your point, your tribe or your community, I think that's really powerful.
So let me ask you, Meg, do you, when you decided to put something like that together, because I know Eric's heard me talk on and on about community czars and how there's a difference between something that organically and grassroots happens, and grassroots still needs some kind of framework, right? It needs somebody to go, hey, let's do breakfast, and notify or let people know, and you have it in a consistent place to you. But how do you balance between curating and leaving it open, like anybody can come in, as opposed to, oh, well, only specific people who do this thing are welcome in the space. So how did you get to the opportunity for a balance in that?
That's a great question. Actually, we've been thinking a lot about this recently, because we learned very quickly that we were a great platform and a very neutral platform to say, hey, let's get breakfast. And everyone would show up because we were a neutral platform. But we have really let the group sort of be grassroots. And so we do send out, you know, the calendar request and sort of the reminder that it's happening to ensure that people have it on their calendar. But we haven't really done much in terms of programming or curating what conversations are happening within that space. But just in the last month, we've had 3 or 4 of the folks that show up most often say, what if we did a quarterly curated educational opportunity? So brought someone in to speak, or had some sort of more curated moment for these individuals. And so I think we set it up, you know, to be very open at the beginning, and now for them to be deciding, sort of for the group itself to be deciding, hey, we might want something that's a little bit more curated every now and then, but to have them curating that, I think we've, you know, gotten pretty lucky that has organically happened, and we've had some folks, you know, take ownership and move forward with some of those things. But the thing we've found across, we do multiple breakfasts. So we do one for corporate innovators, we do one for our early stage startup investors. And what we found to be really helpful in all of them is, to your point, not limiting or restricting who can show up just to create a restriction, but more so to create an authentic community where people feel that they can be open and sharing. And so for our startup investors, the restriction to come to that breakfast is that you have an active investment in Minnesota and you wrote the check within the last 12 months. So this idea that you have to be an active investor in Minnesota to come be part of that conversation And it's not that we don't have other opportunities for more investors to be involved, but that conversation is really about how do we bolster investment in Minnesota. And if you aren't writing checks in Minnesota, that group itself decided that that was the threshold. And so with the Educators and Ecosystem Builders Breakfast, we've really started to talk about that. And the concept is that you have to be providing services or education to entrepreneurs. And so we have a lot of folks in our community that are doing really wonderful things, but aren't actually directly building the startup community or serving entrepreneurs. And so we're in the process of trying to figure out sort of what is that threshold so that we ensure that the people in the room all care about some of the same things, and it doesn't just become, anyone from the community showing up, but that it still is very open and accessible to sort of everyone. So again, talking about where are we hosting and what neighborhoods are we hosting, what time is it happening? We're thinking through a lot of those things. So that's sort
great.
of where we're at.
I think that's wonderful. Louisa, does your organization have convenings like that?
Not similar to what Meg is talking about. I'm trying to think if there's something in our region that's similar, but our organization, and I mean, I don't know, maybe we could think about this a little bit more, but our organization isn't necessarily focused on facilitating the shared vision as much. And as I think about it and listen to it, I think that could be something that would be valuable for our ecosystem. But there's limited resources in our ecosystem. And so we have convenings, but most of them are focused more on actually executing work. And so obviously not just anybody could come to those kind of things. But yeah, I'm just really interested in enjoying listening to what's going on in Minnesota. I'm going to be back there in June. I might hit you up, Meg, to see if you want to hang out.
Yes, we're very excited for Connect Up, right?
Yes, that's what I'll be there for.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, see all these connected networks. So Eric, I think back to when we had the opportunity to visit with some of the people in Albuquerque when Christine and I were there. And I feel like some of the people in the room knew each other and some of the people didn't. And so you're the central point in all of that. And it does depend on someone like you to bring people together, right? At least initially. Is there value? Do they recognize? I feel like they felt it was really good to have certain, other people in the room. So.
Oh, unmute myself here. Yeah. So, and we've done some things that have been maybe a little formal in the past. But I love hearing all this stuff that's going on with Meg. That's fantastic. I know I'll put it this way, we were inspired, but apparently not enough to do some potlucks following ESHIP last year. So we've run out of time. But yeah, I'm not sure. Let's see. I think we've done it with a more formal thing in the past, which is that what I did when I first actually joined government is we started doing a kind of just a quarterly sharing situation for incubators, accelerators, and a couple of other folks who are running similar kinds of programs dealing with entrepreneurs. Mostly kind of no agenda stuff in general, but there's usually a kind of go around the room, what's your biggest event or activity that's coming up that you're focused on? Is there something that that's a current challenge that you're facing? Any other opportunities that we should share? I think those were good. There were always folks who, some people wanted a firmer agenda. But I think I'll just say that in general, those are the people who don't always like playing with others anyway. So there was some resistance among some, but I think in general, most of us, I think, got a fair amount out of it. That kind of partially because it started as something that was our hook was not an organic thing. It was that the economic development director wanted to hear from these different groups. Partially because of that, when some of the priorities shifted and we just couldn't get the economic development director to show up, that kind of withered away. What we've done since then is we're starting to do something that's a little bit more informal. We're not quite at the regular breakfast thing yet, although that's a great idea, just because of some good experiences with, I'll credit the ESHIP champions group, having good, having good use of Slack. So basically went out and invited a handful of the folks who were running programs. Actually tried to make sure it wasn't necessarily exclusive. So of the different 10 or so entities that were out there, I invited at least a rep or two from each of those. And I think we got folks from about 6 of them to sign up. We haven't done a ton with it yet, but I'm thinking, coming out of ESHIP, some of the things that we'll be sharing from there, I think will be useful. So I don't know, we're all learning. I don't know if that's what I've said is valuable at all, but that's where we're at.
No, I think it's really important to see where all the energy is and what's working in places and what's not working in places. Because when we talk about this shared vision, it's like, how many people do you need to be in a room to create shared vision and mission for a field called ecosystem building, right? I mean, is it enough to have 20 people and start? Does it become, well, no, that's not quite right because that's not what we think. And then is it undeniable when it becomes more than 100, more than 200, So to try to curate that, and then like to Eric's point originally, talking about the fact that we don't do the same things. So our roles are different, our focuses are different. The need to be able to have it general enough that we can all look at it and go, yeah, that's it, right? So I love some of the stuff around Startup Champions when you say that people give before you get, it's not transactional, things like that. When you think that leadership can come from anywhere, it's more of a mindset, right? We think about abundance versus scarcity, and those are things that we can embrace. Mm-hmm. And without having to have the same tasks at hand to say, if I say, so I know people who give before they get, other people, no matter what they do, will go, oh yeah, I recognize that and I understand. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how do we get that broad and that general, and at the same time really have it mean something? Because it's like the 10 Commandments, right? You put it out there, and almost all faith practices have some version of don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, treat people right, that kind of thing. Those are core tenets across traditions. So how do you infuse that and put that out as a mission and vision?
I'm going to pull up this email that you sent us.
I just pulled that back up too.
Okay. All right. There's use for this email. It's alignment, right? When we talk about mission, vision, value, and outcomes, I'm looking at 2 screens. So we talk about building alignment under these foundational aspects. And that's a really challenging thing. I think, for us to create a living dictionary will mean having enough people in the room with a consensus, right? To form that. The Wikipedia thing is something that we could work towards, definitely. And knowing that if it's not on Wiki, some people don't think it exists. So we better build that out the way we want to see it built out. But really this field-wide thing. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that we talked about in planning this ESHIP Summit is when we have to do it, or we have to at least lay the foundation, because when else are you going to get 450 people in a room that's focused on this, right? Ecosystem building. And then for people like Meg to be able to weigh in post-event or pre-event to say, yes, that resonates with me, even though I wasn't there, but the people spoke for, so hopefully we're good stewards of that, right? And say what they said, yes, I'm in, right?
Do other fields have examples of this? Like this 3.1 sort of vision, value, kind of, do other fields have this? I'm not sure.
I feel like certain ones do, right? If you
or there's like the Hippocratic Oath, like do you
right. So yeah, so Hippocratic oaths, do no harm, right? Or law enforcement, protect and serve, that kind of thing is it's something. It doesn't have to be big and long and flowery. It could just be simply
like a sentence.
Yeah. But sometimes I find that when you try to get it to one sentence, it is hard.
Yeah. I mean, and so it's a question, are we kind of trying to think about or like brainstorm how we're going to get all the people to weigh in on it, or like all the people?
Well, that's part of what we're going to try to do.
Yeah.
During parts of the event. So so I'm curious. I mean, and Louisa and Eric are going to be there. I'm really also very interested in Meg, who won't be there, who wants to send us out with a mission that says, hey, don't forget about
X.
I don't know what, right? Or please keep this in mind as you do this. So I'm wondering whether or not that's something that we can seed, let's say in the Facebook group, which is a wider audience, and say, as we come together and talk about mission, vision, and values and outcomes of a field, what do you want us to keep in mind? So remember when we had the ESHIP champions convening, and we asked the greater audience, what is it that you want us to think about as we do this work? And I feel like that's something that I can post on the Facebook page and say, so Meg, what do you think is something that you want us to keep in mind as we do this work?
I don't have an answer to your question right now, but I think that it's really smart to be thinking about, because I know that we're sending, 6 of our core partners down, and there's another 4 or 5 from the region that are headed down to ESHIP. But I've had comments from a few other community members saying, oh, when you get back, can you provide me with an update? I can't make it. I would love to hear how it goes. And so I think we're actually going to do a breakfast when our team gets back, so that they can sort of share out what were their biggest takeaways, what were their learnings. Folks can ask questions, and we can just sort of continue that dialogue. But I know a lot of those folks are on the Facebook group or in some other way involved. So I think it's really important to think through, if people can't be there in person, how are we engaging them in that conversation?
And then another thing that just came to me that like I think about a lot when I feel like sometimes we make it harder than it needs to be. Not saying that this conversation isn't valuable, because it is, but sometimes I think that, especially from my perspective as an ecosystem builder, like when I'm constantly asked, like, what do you think? What do you think? Like, I appreciate when, especially large, very influential institutions like the Kauffman Foundation, like want to include and ask, but also sometimes, and this is feedback that I've gotten from like people on my team, they're like, we want the like people or the organizations who are leading this movement to give us what they want, or like give us an idea, and then we can say yes, that resonates, or no. but the people on the ground are like, that are doing this work, they're like, we don't have time to think about, like, we don't have time to come up with this. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I know that that's kind of like what we have volunteered to step into. So I don't have a problem, you know, sitting and chewing on the hard, you know, but the hard thoughts and the hard brainstorming. But feedback that I've gotten from my colleagues is that, like, there are people in place, like you've chosen ESHIP champions, you have the people on staff at Kauffman, you have the people at MBIA, like, you guys are the experts, come up with the mission, show us what you come up with, and then let us know if it resonates with us or not. But we, this is feedback that has come from, like, my grants person. She writes a lot of grants, and I feel like sometimes she has some feelings because she has to, like, try to figure out or guess what people want for all the grants she has to write. So I think that she has had some, you know, this has been like her plight. And so that's kind of some feedback that she shared with me, is that, like, you know, another way to make this accessible for people is to actually, for us to, like, make a decision and then allow space for people to say, that doesn't feel right to me, but not to ask them, what do you think? Because they don't, a lot of times don't have the space to even come up with that. Does that
I think that's, oh, absolutely, because that's exactly what happened with the goal language. So,
okay.
So like the 7 ESHIP goals, right,
Uh-huh.
was through conversations that were had with hundreds and hundreds of people.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully for us, we had Amanda West, who is Andy's partner, and Enoch. And Amanda really, like, culled all of that information down to create 7. I mean, let me tell you, there were 12, okay? And think about the UN Sustainable Goals, right? There's 17.
17.
Like, right, so holy crap, to come up with all the conversations of all the things and have that process to come down. No wonder she's exhausted, like, you know? Right. So to come down to 7, and 7 that when you read them, you go, oh, that totally makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. But then the language around them is what we sat around for the last year. So I'm going to say, while we talk about everything's a draft, I think basically we're done with that. Like, we can't sit there and chew on that anymore. Not that it's not necessarily valuable, but we've had these discussions. Right. And to your point, Louisa, there comes a point where you go, okay, next, right? Put that aside and let's go move on to the next thing. Otherwise, we'll be talking about that forever, the nuances of words. And so when we talk about living dictionaries, Andy's sitting there culling through dictionaries and thesauruses and all over. And so we went from lexicon to terminology. This terminology is specific to industry. Right. So now the definition says common terminology. It doesn't say lexicon. It doesn't say vocabulary. It says terminology. Mm. Okay. So now that decision has been made, and it's not because Andy made the decision, right? Or the Kauffman Foundation made the decision via Andy. It's because that's the word that means the thing. Yeah. And then we go, okay, so that's the word. Next. Like, let's go and build the living dictionary instead of debate on whether or not it's one word as opposed to another. Right. So those are absolutely, and people ask me all the time for toolkits, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have a toolkit. I'm like, I don't know. We're building the toolkit. We're
building the thing too.
Right. We're not even at the tools yet. We're building, like, the thing that houses the toolkit. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm happy to share it with you. And then if you have ideas, add to the toolkit. But I don't have a toolkit to give you. Oh, can you just, like, give it to us? No, actually, I can't. So I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes it does take, and when else are we going to do it? But when when we're in the room, when the majority of people are in the room, what I'm going to invite to make that you think about it, that I'm going to invite people who are on the Facebook page to say, I'm not necessarily going to be there in that space, but as you do this work, please think about, right? So the same thing we did with the ESHIP champions. Let's think about, let's put top of mind what the community would like us to, because we have a mission. Eric, thanks for sharing that stuff. So tell us a little bit about it.
I'll share one more little piece. Yeah, I've been trying to think and type and just trying to think. That's all I can accomplish sometimes. Where my head's going is, and I just actually had a workshop for 2 days talking about small sats and the need for standardization in the small satellite industry. And basically where my head begins to go, I was thinking, this will be circuitous, I just jump around a lot, but I'll try to make sure that it has a point and it's relatively brief. When I was thinking about the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, I like the idea of Congress. I like the idea, and I believe that Startup America Partnership was at least somewhat like this at some point, where intentionally they had voices from most of the states that came together to kind of highlight what their priorities were. And it feels like what we kind of need to get to is something that is a representative body that can help take this forward. And the tricky thing is, Kaufman is the de facto owner of this thing, and has been a huge champion and done, I think, 95% of the things very well. But we're kind of getting to a point where in order to really have people speak their mind and make things happen, there needs to be like a standards board or some other kind of entity that maybe they're elected, maybe they're nominated. There's some sort of process behind that has representation from your Case Foundation and I don't know, Kresge, Kapoor, and Kaufman. But you've got some representation from those kinds of players, but you also are involving, people who are ecosystem builders themselves. And it feels like there's that kind of trusted entity is needed to help make some decisions. Not necessarily right now, but as we enter kind of this next phase, that would provide clarity, but it also provides ownership for the people who are coming to the table. And then I'm thinking of World Wide Web standards and how that breaks into different little communities or different committees that are working on what are the accessibility guidelines, how are we making sure, for the visually impaired, for people who are, have, from physical different capabilities, how are we bringing all that to the table? And it feels like that kind of structure lends itself to more mass collaboration than where we're at right now, which is kind of that sticky, like, yeah, we want to head in that direction, but is it okay? Is Victor okay with what we're doing? It feels like we need to move beyond that. And that's the troublesome piece where we're at. The reason I shared those things are IEDC is a standards making body. Their business model is probably that they do a bunch of workshops that are relatively, and to me, they're too expensive to do yet, but you get the certification as an economic developer, and some places, when they're hiring people in the economic development world, they want that certification. It's a requirement, or it's something that's on their potential list. So that's one of the reasons why I shared theirs. And I didn't know, but I assumed and found that they have a code of ethics. So, making sure that there's some kind of a code to this. There are lots of good examples, but that was the one that's sort of adjacent to what we're doing that felt like a good thing to learn from. I don't know how they got to that point, but it seems like it might be good to talk with those folks about how they got there.
That's a really great point. Thank you for bringing that up. That is actually goal 4.5, no, 4.6, a field governing or standards board. So it's in there, it's top of mind, it's been identified as, the things that we need to do is have a standards body. I know Andy talks often about the fact that, Kaufman found, so Christine, when she frames the national resource providers, Kaufman has been the convening body. It's not ownership as much as because we can, we must. So because the Kauffman Foundation is able to, then it makes total sense for them to have been the convening body. The whole goal, as Andy says, is to be the vanishing mediator, which means that slowly, other people come in and they become part of it, and they become the ones that drive it, right? It's not just the Kauffman Foundation that drives this effort. It's all of us doing all of the things. It is mass collaboration. So in order to get to the mass collaboration part, so we talk about grassroots ecosystem building, needing some kind of framework. It's invisible, it's squishy, but it needs some framework. You don't say, okay, so all you people just go do the thing, because to Louisa's point, it's like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm not sure, or why are you asking me? Like, I have other stuff to do. So just do it, right? And so there's a balance that needs to take place. And thankfully, we've had people like the three of you on the call that comes in and says, okay, I'm gonna lend my brain power. I'm gonna lend my energy and effort to help support this. So that's where we're at right now. And we're getting ready to embark on this deliver opportunity where we're going to be delivering these pilot project programs. One of the things that we'll talk about is the language. So what we've had is initiatives. No,
friends, I have to go.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Hop in my car, and I'm like looking for my keys. I can't find them, so I'm gonna go. But yeah, I'll if there's any, I can like do a little TLDR. Oh yeah, you're like tour of my house. This is my home. And I'll see you guys on Tuesday. I'm gonna get in on Monday, so I'll be around.
Okay. Well, I think there's a bunch of them, so that'll be great. Thank you.
Sweet. I'm gonna see you guys soon. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye. Bye, Louisa. So, Meg, we won't see you. I will put it out on the Facebook page that to think about what you would like us to keep in mind or keep top of mind as we do this work, and send us out with a mission, a hope, whatever. Okay. And Eric, I will see you. Any parting thoughts? Any last whatever nuggets of wisdom? Both of you.
Let's see.
I don't think so. I'm thinking, Eric. Oh, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to say, I feel like it was you that mentioned in one of our previous conversations, and it may have been on this call or on the goals call, about, how do you use Twitter to put something out to folks? And I recently saw a lot of success with that here locally. We have it's called MiniStar. It's sort of our Minnesota technology community. And we've been trying to get feedback from folks on goals and what metrics matter to you and within your work. And so we've been having a lot of these conversations more formally in focus groups, and we have a survey out to the community, but getting survey responses is always a challenge. And the director of MiniStar put out a question to her community and basically did a poll on Twitter and said, what do you think we have the most to work on in our MinTech community, or sort of what do you think we need to be focused on most? And she just put 5 different things or areas where she thought, she had heard through our other conversations that we're struggling. And she got 89 responses in like 2 days. And so that idea of, and I think, to Louisa's point, for those that don't have the time to really sit down and think through some of these things the way we all are allowed to within our roles, how do we give them sort of those bite-sized opportunities or those small moments where they can be giving feedback or be involved in the conversation? And so I think, again, I won't be down at ESHIP, but where there's some of those moments via Facebook or Twitter or other opportunities where we can, provide that to folks, that really quick sort of instantaneous feedback loop.
Cool. So I'll just say, if someone from your team is getting it arrives on Monday and can do the unconference, I love the idea of someone talking about, getting community feedback through Twitter or through social media or something along those lines. So I'm sort of like, I've tried to turn what you're talking about into my parting point or question is just how do we amplify and get more voices into the conversation? Because there's always folks who are kind of stay on the sidelines and, might want to think a little bit before they speak or share something. And sometimes we worry that we don't get those folks. So one of the things I hope we're able to get through the unconference is to highlight some of those voices and really the more that we can hear from different places throughout the country that are doing good things, the better for all of us. Because when I walk away, I want to say, hey, look at the amazing things they're doing in Minnesota, or I love whatever else. So that's my unformed thought, but my request that if you've got somebody going, encourage them to participate in the unconference and kind of raise up one thing that you think you're doing well. And because I think that number of responses on Twitter is actually really good. so I'm like,
I agree. I was so impressed. I want that level of response rate. So can you do the 1 minute overview on what is the unconference, sort of how it's being unstructured, I guess you could say, or when it's happening, since I'm not involved in all those threads, since I'm not attending.
And let's see. So some of the details I'll leave for Cecilia. I'm forgetting if we are actually starting at 1 or 1:30.
So the sessions start at 1. Sign-ups start at 12:30.
Oh,
and
okay.
the session starts at 1, and they're 20-minute sessions. So I can help you with logistics. The rest is Eric and Hassan and their magic.
And so basically, not everyone, a lot of us, a lot of the discussions are not necessarily comfortable with an unconference. The thing that an unconference does well is it really provides an opportunity to bring new voices to the table and new voices to be part of the conversation. Kaufman recognizes with 450 folks in the room, they can't put all of us on stage to give us that spotlight moment. However, we also know that not all the innovation is coming from the folks who've been selected to share some part of their story. So knowing that there is a wealth of information from the community, we wanted to provide an opportunity for at least some of those folks to share, this is what's important to me and I need help figuring it out. Or I figured the best absolute way to judge what an ecosystem looks like, and here's my plan. And if you're interested in learning how mine works, great. So I expect we'll see a variety of folks. Ideally, there's some discussion involved, but there's probably a few folks that might be on the one-to-many. There'll be others that are more of an open discussion that probably starts with something that's personal experience from the person who's launching or owns the topic. But really, we're providing some additional opportunity for conversations that might not otherwise happen. And by doing it at the very beginning, we're also providing an opportunity for folks to say, I've seen Cecilia online. She seems really interesting. If I meet her in one of these topic rooms, this could be the beginning of a conversation that takes place throughout ESHIP or throughout the year. I'm not sure if that's a good pitch, but I also look at it as sort of a safety valve. A lot of people want to share a lot of things, and this is a good opportunity to do so. It is not, we're trying to make sure that it's not alien to people who really like a lot of structure. So that's one of the roles for people with the organizers is say, for the folks who are lingering at the back of the room, how do we bring those voices to a place where we can all share in their wisdom? So it's all about the mass collaboration. How do we bring those new voices in?
That's great. It was a good pitch. I wish I could be there. Truthfully, I don't need a lot of structure, so it sounds really ideal for me. I love ambiguity, or at least operate pretty well within it. So, and so what day is that happening?
It's on Tuesday. On
Tuesday. Okay, awesome. Well, I'll shoot an email out. I know that, so Matt Lewis from our team, I don't know if you've met Matt previously.
I recognize the name.
You maybe have.
I think so.
So he will be attending and sort of like leading the charge from the Minnesota front. But I will make sure that they're all aware of that and, push them to coordinate what are the one or two things that, someone from Minnesota wants to sort of bring up and highlight the things we're doing here and have a conversation around. So that's great that I'm keyed into that. And again, very bummed that I can't be there.
So the other thing that I want to put out there that Eric and I are involved in, which is not necessarily to do with ESHIP, but in Madison, Wisconsin, is the Startup Champions Network Summit in the fall, Meg, and
yes.
That may be something that that would be beneficial to you. I know it would probably be beneficial to us to have you actually attend if you're interested, and one of us can nominate you for the opportunity to do that. It's, if you're familiar with Startup Champions.
That would be wonderful.
Okay, because I'm talking to Brandon about having him come, so that might be a great opportunity in Madison.
Road trip, Brandon and I.
Yeah, so it'll be very different because Startup Champions is more where our conferences are a little more scrappy startup. We share Airbnbs and it's getting to appreciate the local flavor, and so it's a little bit different than this production. So we don't have a production team that's going to help us do these things. But oh, you're breaking up.
Well, that would be great. I've talked with a lot of folks in the Startup Champions involved, sort of as I've finally settled into my role in ecosystem building here in Minnesota. So that would be a wonderful opportunity and welcome sort of the scrappy nature. We're in Toronto sharing an Airbnb that I'm calling the MTV Real World House. It's like going to be 12 of us in a big hostel-like house. So I'm all about that. And we've actually been talking with Scott from Madison. And we were going to do a trip a few weeks back just to see what they're doing and share and spend a day with them. And we all are just running so hard at the moment that from both ends we said, let's push it back a few months. But that would be great to have a reason to go to Madison and sort of combine that into the Startup Champions Summit. Great. So that'd be great.
Okay, we totally hijacked this call to talk about Startup Champions.
Yes.
But that's okay.
All right. The good things, but thank you.
Good. Yes. So have a wonderful time at Collision. We will miss your voice, but we'll look forward to having that the contribution as I'll post the thing on Facebook. Okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you, and look forward to all of the recap and getting back on these calls to follow to keep doing this great work. So thank you, and enjoy ESHIP.
Great. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Eric, I'll see you next week. Are you getting in on Monday?
I'm getting in real late on Monday. I think it's like midnight, give or take. So, and I think I'm supposed to hear from Dave about where. But yeah, I'll